Welcome to A Changing Climate. I'm Tom Pihota, Vice President for Research and Graduate Studies at UNLV. Today we'll introduce to you a major research, education, and outreach project designed to help you understand climate change and its effects in Nevada. I'm one of 3 lead investigators on the Nevada Infrastructure for Climate Change Science, Education, and Outreach project. I'll be talking with several researchers about their contributions to this 5-year project. We'll explore how a $15 million grant from the National Science Foundation has brought together researchers from UNLV, UNR, the Desert Research Institute, and Nevada State College. Here with me is Scott Mensing. Scott is a University of Nevada, Reno geography professor, as well as one of the lead investigators on the project. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, thanks, Tom.
So Scott, 2012 was one of the hottest years on record they just announced this year. Yeah. And on top of that, I hear that this next weekend is going to be one of the coldest weekends over like the last 5 years, I think. So certainly it's a changing climate. It makes for interesting times. Yeah, certainly that's a big motivating factor for a big project like this. Tell us a little bit about the project and what were the goals of the project and what were some of the different activities going on in the project also?
Well, as you mentioned, it was the interest in the concern about climate change that brought a group of individuals together originally to look ahead at what does Nevada need in terms of improving our ability within the scientific and research community to be able to address problems such as climate change. And so one of the big goals of the project was to develop the kind of infrastructure that makes Nevada more competitive in terms of not only doing research but going after federal funding to support the kind of efforts needed in terms of learning more about climate modeling, future climate modeling in the state, what's happening with water resources, and what might be some of the ecological impacts should climate change begin to change the conditions here in Nevada.
Right. I think we have a diagram that highlights some of those different components on the project and the different institutions that are represented in the project also. Certainly a project like this too, you mentioned it when you were talking about the project, it's about infrastructure building and bringing infrastructure to the project. Tell me a little bit about what are those infrastructure pieces that this $15 million was able to purchase for us?
Well, we built this around 6 components because it's fairly broad. One of those components is climate modeling, and so some of the infrastructure associated with that was actually developing a climate modeling group. Another was ecological and hydrologic change, and a very large infrastructure piece built to support those efforts was a set of transects in the Snake Range and the Sheep Range of Nevada. So the Sheep Range being about 35 miles north of metropolitan Las Vegas, and the Snake Range being right next to Great Basin National Park. There are sets of very high-resolution meteorological and ecological sensors that are giving us, reading out changes in the temperature, in the way plants are growing, at 1-minute intervals. So we have very high resolution, continually running data to support trying to understand how things are changing in terms of trying to better understand how policy decisions might be made. A geovisualization lab was built at UNLV. And at each of the 3 institutes, we hired new faculty with expertise in areas that we didn't have previous.
So a lot of students and teachers are involved in this also. Tell us a little bit about the involvement of students and teachers in this also.
Students at 3 different levels have been involved. In the K through 12, we had a Summer Institute program that supported high school teachers coming and working with researchers in the summertime, sometimes in their labs, sometimes going out on projects to better understand how they might develop curriculum to insert back into the classroom that is related to ecology and climate change. But then we also supported undergraduate students who had research experiences from all of the different campuses, including the community colleges, as well as supporting graduate students who then were developing new research through their master's and dissertation projects.
And there was a summer institute, I think, that you had, and I think we have a video here that's going to highlight this. Let's take a look at this video that highlights a summer institute that brings together middle school teachers and the field and lab exposure that they got through this summer institute.
24 Nevada teachers went back to school this summer. Funded by Nevada's National Science Foundation EPSCoR Climate Change Project, the teachers spent 2 weeks working with climate change scientists, taking field trips, and exploring Nevada's diverse ecosystems. The goal? To increase their knowledge about climate change and learn some new techniques to take back to their classrooms. UNR grad student Melissa Sladen coordinated the Reno Summer Institute. Nevada State College professor Larry Rudd oversaw the 2-week institute in Las Vegas.
The educational outcomes we're looking for have to do with the application of the material by the teachers in their classrooms. That's really the essential part, is that they take away knowledge and techniques that they can apply directly in the classroom with their students.
This year's essential question is concerned with disturbance regimes, specifically ones that affect our region and are associated with climate change.
Teachers spent time both in and out of the classroom.
This past 2 weeks has been phenomenal. We have been in the classroom 2 days, and every other day we have been out in the field somewhere, and we have had the most amazing scientists.
I've seen 30,000-year-old pack rat middens that show evidence of different kinds of plants that the pack rats have collected over time.
We went out and tracked tortoises with radio telemetry gear.
We've done invasive species. We've been back to DRI, and we got to tour the cave.
We met professionals who were able to explain to us how climate change was affecting various environments, such as rocks and minerals, our mountain environments, our subterranean environments.
We've collected fossils of maple trees in the middle of a desert.
We've been out to Carson, and we've seen where the waterfall fire was and what they're doing to get that vegetation growing back.
When they weren't digging up fossils or collecting water samples, the teachers planned and presented lessons in class.
Actually, I'm intending to do a year-long study with my students where they will be observing mostly plant organisms on our school playground to see how they change over time. The idea is to put that into a bigger context with data across the country and how what our bloom times are and how they're changing over time as a result of changes in global temperature.
Because I think the greatest impact is to take these teachers, give them the information, give them the contacts, get them out here and really have them, and we dug up fossils last week, or really get their hands dirty, get their brains thinking about this.
The teachers say working with climate change scientists will help them prepare students for the environmental challenges they'll face in the future.
Our natural resources in the state are amazingly huge, and we need to protect a lot of it. I know people drive through Tonopah and think, oh goodness, there's nothing here, but there are, and we need to honor and respect those things for what they are.
Thank you, Scott, for taking the time from your busy schedule to talk to us about your work. When we come back, we'll tell you how researchers are collecting data 365 days a year from across the state.
Being a gold medalist skier requires a lot of hard work, intense training, and time outside on the mountain. But taking care of my skin is easy and doesn't affect my performance. Every day I apply sunscreen and wear protective gear. I know protecting my skin will help prevent skin cancer and avoid wrinkles. I get my skin checked regularly by a dermatologist. 1 in 5 Americans will develop some form of skin cancer in their lifetime. My name is Julia Mancuso, and I'm wearing orange to help put a spotlight on skin cancer.
Welcome back. Our next guests are leading the effort in water resources and ecological studies. Dr. Lynn Fenstermaker is from the Desert Research Institute, and Dr. Dale Devitt is from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Welcome, Dale and Lynn.
Pleasure to be here.
So Lynn, Scott mentioned in our earlier interview that we're building a major infrastructure piece of the project. It's the climate monitoring system, which is TransX in northern and southern Nevada. Why is this an important major infrastructure piece for monitoring the climate and monitoring TransX, both from a scientific and a community perspective?
Well, without monitoring stations, we have absolutely no idea how the climate's changing. And what's really unique about these two transects is that the one is located at the transition between the Mojave and Great Basin Desert, and the other is in the heart of the Great Basin Desert, where there's really very few monitoring stations, particularly at elevation. And so that very unique aspect is not only two locations, but we're going from valley floor to mountaintop.
Okay.
And I'm
So
sorry.
what do one of these stations look like? You know, is it a weather station, or is it a bigger than a weather station? I think we have some pictures of those, so maybe we can put up these pictures and you can tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, the first picture we're showing you is from one of our valley floor stations. This is in the Sheep Transect, the Mojave Desert Shrub location. And this is on Fish and Wildlife Service land, Desert Wildlife Refuge. And we have a standard set of unique monitoring equipment, basic meteorological equipment, as well as real-time communications and a way to measure precipitation input, which is really important in Nevada. We're the driest state in the nation, and so what's happening with our water resources is critical. So we can measure that water input, and then we can measure the fate of that water. Is it being held in soil storage? Is it going into the groundwater? Is it being evaporated? And how are plants using that? So the goal is to understand what's happening to our water resources and that impact on ecological function. And then we have monitoring stations on mountaintops, as you can see in this image. And again, it's instrumented very similarly. We just have a few extra sensors so we can look at snow depth.
Okay. So Dale, I think certainly in those pictures we see a lot of plants, and the ecological aspects are probably an important part of what we're measuring. We heard a lot about the water and the climate aspects. Can you talk a little bit about the ecological aspects that these monitoring stations are measuring, and what the importance of that is for the impacts in Nevada here?
Well, these mountains, of course, are comprised of various plant communities as you move up from the valley to the top of the mountains. And so we're very much interested in how climate change will impact them, especially from a water perspective. We're interested in how water will be partitioned and move from one plant community down to the next as it finally makes its way to the valley and recharges the groundwater. And so we have a number of studies looking at how the plants themselves are responding using sap flow gauges and dendrometers and soil moisture data. One of the things I've been interested in is the plants growing down on the valley floor that are dependent on the groundwater that will have to make its way down the mountain. So climate change, there's significant warming, which will increase water use and less precipitation perhaps, then less water will make its way down to recharge the groundwater. And so there are shrubs called phreatophytes that are dependent on groundwater to meet part of their water needs. So we've been looking at them in terms of how they can become coupled and decoupled from the groundwater, and how they then are able to or not able to compete with non-phreatophytes. And so that becomes an issue not only with regards to climate change, but also the fact that communities like Las Vegas look to these upper basins for potential water sources.
Great. Well, we have some video of the monitoring stations and the researchers who are out there working and to build those. So we're going to view that video now.
Sophisticated monitoring stations like this are sprouting like weeds throughout Nevada's Great Basin and Mojave Desert. Funded by the National Science Foundation EPSCoR Nevada Climate Change Project, Scientists are using the stations to study the possible effects of climate change on the state's ecological systems and water resources.
The Nevada ecosystems are extremely interesting. It's really one of the best places to study climate change because of the very low impact from human population outside of the urban centers.
5 sites in the Sheep Range and 7 sites in the Snake Range are strategically positioned to form transects, a scientific term that describes a strip of land from which measurements are taken at regular intervals. These measurements form a baseline from which responses to changes in temperature or precipitation may be noted. To measure these changes, each site is equipped with a variety of sensors and monitoring devices. Some even include webcams that routinely scan the area surrounding the site.
On each of these stations, we will be measuring atmospheric variables, hydrologic variables, and ecological variables as part of the baseline data set that we're developing.
It's also allowing us to assess the fate of that precipitation. Is it going into surface soil moisture storage? Is it percolating deep within the soil profile, or is it being transpired by the plants?
Sites are located at different elevations, close enough to form a transect, but far enough away to support new vegetation.
That's why we're placing these towers at multiple elevations but in the same mountain range, so that we, within a close spatial proximity, can look at some of these different environmental variables across different elevations.
Measurements from the 5 sites in the southern transect are taken every 30 minutes and stored on servers at UNR. Scientists access the data through a web portal specially designed for this purpose. Measurements from the Spring Valley will be sent to a repeater on Cave Mountain, then to Great Basin Community College, and finally up to UNR.
We've got implementation, we've got installation of the equipment, and so now the exciting part comes in to distribute this data, to open up the floodgates, let this data kind of out into the scientific community, and to start teasing out some of these relationships.
We were very fortunate to get the EPSCoR funding to put this in place, and now again our goal is to take advantage of that, to leverage it to where we can compete with other universities throughout the United States.
This is a tremendous project. It's very exciting because of all the sensors, the unique collection of people and science being brought together. So we get a better understanding of the dynamics happening in this dry environment.
So that showed a lot of the great locations for the transects. Are any of these places the public can go to and visit?
Absolutely. Almost all of our sites are on public land. All of our Sheep Range transect sites are in the Desert Wildlife Refuge just north of Las Vegas, and you can see them from the road. Our Snake Range transects, one is in the Great Basin National Park, and several are on BLM, Bureau of Land Management land, and a couple are on private land, but they're viewable from the highway.
Great. Dale, anything that this transects now have allowed you to do that you weren't really able to do 5 years ago? Anything exciting really that came up?
Well, I think again, it's exciting to get out in the field and to climb up through the mountains and just view areas that I had never been to before. And just a side story, one of the things that I've gotten excited about is cold air drainage, which I would have never thought about studying before, but the transect system provides me an opportunity to do that. And so
Great.
we have a study doing that now, and so I'm quite excited about
Great.
it.
All right. Well, thank you, Dale, and then this has been exciting. Don't go away. We have some fun games coming up.
It was hard at first when I found out how sick he was. The doctor suggested hospice care at home. Hospice helped so much. They helped me take care of him. We were able to find some joy till the very end.
In order to beat breast cancer, I knew I would have to lose my breast. But to reclaim my life, I chose breast reconstruction.
Each year, nearly 150,000 women will learn they will undergo a mastectomy due to breast cancer. But 7 out of 10 women are never told about their breast reconstruction options. Breast reconstruction is a very important part of the healing process, both physically and emotionally. Download my song Flower to share the message and help us share the fact that women can feel whole again.
Our final guests are from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and are working on educational aspects of the project. Dr. Michael Nussbaum from the Department of Educational Psychology and Higher Education, and doctoral student Marissa Owens, also from that department. Welcome, Michael and Marissa.
Hi, good to be here.
There are a wide range of educational activities going on in this project. We heard a little bit about those earlier in the segments. Michael, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what are some of the other educational activities going on in the projects, and also why is it important to have a specific educational component on a project like this that's really large?
Well, our educational components are directed both at higher education and K-12 education. And in higher ed, for example, we have the UROP program, the University Research Opportunity Grants, which fund undergraduate students to work with a mentor. We give out about 30 of those a year. And that's important because we're really training the next generation of not just climate scientists, but scientists that, for example, will be developing, working on alternative energy and a whole spectrum of things. So it helps strengthen the infrastructure of doing science research. But the other major goal, I think, of the education component is just to educate everyone in K-12, at the university, and the general public about what climate change is all about. I mean, the amount of ignorance on this topic is somewhat staggering. And I know that just from working with my own graduate students who aren't necessarily in the sciences. They don't really think about climate change that much with all the other issues going on. So just getting a basic level of literacy on what climate is, what climate change is, what the evidence for it is, that's really important. So we've developed about 9 climate change courses at the undergraduate level, and they're in different subjects, so that will help everyone get, or it gives us multiple avenues for making contact with different undergraduates. And then
one of those graduate students is here with us today, Marissa. Marissa, you've been involved in several aspects of the project. Maybe tell us a little bit about those. One of them is a video game we're going to be seeing, and also curriculum development. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so these past few years, like you mentioned, I've been working on 2 main projects. One of them is called the Losing the Lake project, and that basically involved developing an educational online simulation video game of sorts to teach middle school students about climate change and how that climate change affects the lowering Lake Mead water levels and how that impacts the Las Vegas Valley as a whole. In addition, you mentioned the climate change course curriculum development project, and that involved partnering with the Nevada higher education system and basically eliciting proposals from local universities and colleges and partnering with them to develop new courses surrounding climate change and sustainability. And how Dr. Nussbaum mentioned, we were able to develop 9 new courses surrounding climate change, but also targeting gaps that we have in our curriculum surrounding different subject areas like English, social studies, distance ed, policy. We awarded $60,000.
Great. Let's take a look at this video game. It sounds pretty exciting. I believe we have it up here on the screen, and we're going to do some demonstration. Michael, maybe
we are now going to see what you
we've got
already
some questions
know
up there
before we begin the other activities
that are starting to run. Maybe I'll be the participant in the game. Maybe you can read the question off to me, and I'll see if I can answer it.
Yeah, well, the video game has several parts to it, and the first part that we'll be looking at now is a series of multiple choice questions just to build up people's background knowledge. So for example, and this is from the harder set, so.
Well, let's see here. The most important factor in determining the amount of water flowing in the Colorado River, I'm going to guess, well, especially since it's wintertime, I'm going to guess that it's snowfall in the Rocky Mountains.
So,
yeah, I got it right. All right, next one.
Yes, well, Lake Mead water levels have been dropping over the last 10 years due primarily to, when you can choose, evaporation, drought, population growth.
All right, I'm going to go for, I'm going to say because it's It's the drought. Hey, I got it right. Wow.
Right.
All right. All right. We're going to need to go back then, but that sounds like a really interesting tool there.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one last thing. Is this something that's going to be available to the public and widely and demonstrated in public places?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's available to the public, first of all, because it is on the web, and it's freely available to anyone who wants to play it if they get onto the Climate Change portal. But also, we've installed it in the Las Vegas Natural History Museum, and it'll be available also shortly in the Lake Mead Visitor Center.
Great.
So,
All right. Well, that sounds like an exciting activity, and your educational aspects sound exciting also. So thanks, Michael and Marissa, for talking about your educational aspects. Join us again for our next show when we'll talk to project leaders from across the state who focus on the development of cyber infrastructure, climate change modeling, policy outreach efforts. Thanks again for joining us.